So what do you make the intro?
Just be the intro.
The intro is like
No, this is the intro.
Whose song is that? Oh, that's Long Hair Pretty Nails. I love her. Alright, I'm gonna stop stealing. Wow. Hi, welcome back to our channel.
What's going on, people? It's another long morning.
Well, I'm gonna make a disclaimer. Everyone uses disclaimers like this. I'm terrible at cameras. I don't know why. Like, I have a whole channel I've been doing for a year, and I still don't like being on the camera. What you want me to say? If you hear that sucking, that's my son sucking his pacifier. I think he's trying to see if he can get milk out of it. But
He just ate.
he just ate.
He literally just
And I
ate.
think he's gonna try to see what he can get out of it. So that's him breathing like he's a runaway slave.
Oh god.
That's exactly what it's like. So if you see me looking down in this video, is also because I have like our little like outline for what we're gonna talk about today. I'm gonna be looking down just to keep track of our thoughts, because I, as you can see, a rainbow.
And I'm trying to learn how to look at the camera. So if you see me staring dead at the camera, looking crazy the whole time, it's because I'm trying to learn how to focus on the camera.
You know, I look dead at the lens. I don't look at myself in the rear view. I mean, at the rear view. Wow, in the viewfinder, because I've mastered that for my channel, but I'm still not good at it. Like, it makes me like, ooh, someone's staring.
So today is the official name explanation video for our son's name.
Yeah, because he has a very unorthodox name, I think. A lot of people say it's very unique, and we want to elaborate on it.
And people were asking, some people are asking why he has a different last name than us. And this video should answer questions and I guess enlighten you, concern,
all of that. And hopefully helpful to you if you're new and you're watching and you may feel apprehensive about naming your child something completely different than you, or, you know, whatever. Yeah. It's okay. So, his name.
His full name is Faze
Asar
Rakoy.
And so, as you probably know, if you don't know, Faze, I guess you can explain that because that's like your name.
So, I don't know, I'm going to give a long / short explanation of the name. It's my artist name, my performance name, also one of my nicknames that a lot of my friends call me. Dora even calls me Faze. A lot of people know me as Faze. I came up with the name on my own around like 2014. Just pretty much rebranding myself and, you know, just trying to come up with a cool name. So came up with Faze, and it's pretty much stuck with me and everybody that's met me outside of like immediate family and stuff like that. Most people call me Faze, and you know, I just pretty much gave the actual name to Nose. We decided that it would be a cool name for him to actually have. You know, people were already asking me if that was my real name. People were saying that it sounds cool. People were assuming it was my real name also. So, you know, we thought we might as well just put it out into the universe as a real name. So now it's somebody's real name, and it's our son's real name. His middle name was more introduced to, I mean, his middle name was introduced to me by his mom. She knows more about the story than I do. I just agreed with it because I liked how it sounded. I like the the story behind it, and I thought it was cool. So I'll let mommy explain that one.
Yeah, well, his middle name is Asar. Not Azar, Asar. And the reason why his middle name is Asar because it's just a popular name from an old story, believed to be true, from ancient Egypt or Kemet. And you might have heard of it or not, but it's Asar, also known as Osiris, and then there's Aset and Haru. And Aset is the woman, Haru is their son, and Azar basically is the god of the afterlife, which may sound a little scary. And I'm like, oh my God, why would you name your son God of the afterlife? But it's a lot deeper than just about death. And I just thought it was dope. And basically, Asar also was the first mummy. You may not know these stories because they're black history that we're not taught in school and basically brush under the rug to believe that a lot of stories that are now are the true and
the polished stories.
The polished stories. The Holy Trinity, you may know as Jesus, God, or the Son, Father, and Holy Ghost, or Mary being the mom, Jesus being the son, and so forth and so on. But it's believed to be true that that story actually came from the story of Asar, Aset, and Haru, which were all given new names as, you know, Greek got their hands on to Kemet's information and changed things, blah, blah, blah. But I really like the power behind the name Asar. Like I said, he was the first mummy, so you may know a mummy is, you know, being wrapped in this fabric or gauze. But Aset found all of his pieces in different continents of his body after he was disassembled and put him back together as a mummy. And he just had a lot of power, you know, as being like a god. And so I just really love the story because it kind of takes away the power from a lot of European told stories that may or may have not been, but may have been stolen from a lot of Kemet. Kemet was the first place where most doctors came from, and these people were black. And, you know, do your research. I'll leave links below. I learned a lot of information from a guy by the name of Anthony Browder. He is amazing. I want to go to his Egypt Atomic field trip at some point in Washington, D.C. and learn more about, you know, where Kemet can be found in America, believe it or not. So yeah, that's a very long story, but that was like the quick version. Very empowering middle name. His middle name, yes, is an ancient Egypt middle name, and people might also dissociate it because he's African American, but, you know, being a black person, your roots are from Africa, so I thought it was really important to give him an African middle name. So that's the story of his middle name.
Middle name. Disclaimer to any religious stuff that has nothing to do with religion, that has nothing to do with how we feel about religion, that has nothing to do with any of that. It's just the name that we like.
It's very empowering.
Very
also.
Empowering name. That's
very
a very
empowering name.
Very important thing we were looking for when naming our sons.
I mean, I like to believe that, you know, your name, there is also a big connection to your destiny by your name. I don't think that it's coincidental that you're named the name that you're named, because my name is Dora, my real name, and my name actually means God's gift. So that may sound very like cliche, but I've noticed, I feel like my name has a lot to do with how I operate every day. It's important to name our children names that is going to empower their lives, because I believe power of the tongue is important. I believe, you know, manifestation is real, and the more you empower your kids by just calling their name, I feel like it's something that leads them to greater things and better things.
So that just brings us to the point of his last name, which is what we feel is the most empowering part of his name, and, you know, something that's very important to him in the future, something that's going to be very important to him in the future, and something that's very important to us now as far as raising him and teaching him and just all that stuff. His last name is Rakoy. had we had his whole name pretty much figured out way before he was conceived, and probably except for the middle name. So
the middle name, yeah, the middle name was a part that I added because I didn't have a middle name for him initially, but I decided to do a lot more just because I was having a son. It really propelled me into an atmosphere to want to learn about who I am as far as where I come from, my roots as a black woman, and I dug very deep in most of my pregnancy where I started to learn a lot about being a black woman, not what America tells us, but what I chose to learn, what I did my own research on. And I was very overwhelmed and surprised at the information that we were not subject to in school, and even worse, subject to in our home. And it was very alarming, very empowering, very emotional for me. So I had to make sure I incorporate his name in the process, of learning that stuff. And I felt like it was the best decision. And also his middle name, before we go, I jump back to his middle name because it's also a part that I wanted to say. Babe actually came up with a cool way to spell his middle name, because his middle name initially, the real spelling for Asar is A-U-S-A-R. We dropped the U and just kept the A-S-A-R because it sounds kind of like a double entendre, is how you say it, to like ASMR, because I do ASMR. So I thought that was cool. It's funny and weird, but it sounds cool.
That's just a little Easter egg.
Yeah, it's like cool, like AS,
We did a lot of research and a lot of learning, like she said, stuff that they don't teach us in school, stuff that our families don't teach us, stuff that our families didn't care to do the research or even knew about in the first place. As soon as we found out we were having a son, we were interested in things like that, which we don't knock our parents for not knowing these things, because they got stuff to do, they got stuff to take care of, but we actually had time to dig into our roots and search our names and where they come from, the actual meaning behind them, and we just did a bunch of history diving. And we just, personally for me, the biggest thing for me, and this is not the initial reason why his last name is different, but my dad has the last name that I have, but my dad's dad does not have that same last name. So for me, my last name is already lost, and sorry, we had to go pick up Nose because he got frustrated. He just woke up from his 2-minute nap.
Okay, he was knocked out on me.
So
now he's taking turns on daddy.
Yeah, like I was saying, pretty much my dad doesn't have his dad's last name. He has his stepfather's last name. And, I just think it's important to know where you come from at least. And, not to say that I'm not going to do any work on finding out, the actual roots of my actual grandfather on that side's last name, but at the same time I'm having a son and I want to make sure he's empowered through his last name. I can't just give him any last name, and it's harder to explain when you're not actually going through it. I never really tried to explain it, but it makes sense to me to give him his own last name and to have him a part of something that has value, and we're working hard to add value to his last name so that he feels empowered by it and he feels like he doesn't have to search so hard for his history. And we're going to try to be the parents that actually keep him up to date on that. It's not about separating ourselves from our family or anything like that. It just it's really important to us.
I believe there's a value in last names that maybe black people don't or haven't had a chance to understand, because I've noticed in America most of the time when a child's born they take on their dad's last name. And from what I noticed, and I'm not saying this is necessarily true, but from what I think I know, I noticed that usually you know, you consider like the role is the dad is the breadwinner. Obviously, that's not the case these days. So we keep traveling old traditions and don't really know why we're recycling old traditions, and that's something that I like to break when I try to understand why are we still doing things that are traditionally okay if they don't even apply to us these days. And I think the last name people take it on from the dad because they're the ones who have maybe the financial stability. And so when you take on the last name, you take on the value and the assets of that person. So when they pass away, their value and assets go directly to, you know, the kid. Like the names have that process. It makes it easier. So I'm thinking, if that's the case, if we be real, black people, our last names and our identity was stolen when they took our ancestors from Africa and brought them here as slaves. So if that's the case, then that means our last names have no value to us as black people in America. Our last names are our white slave masters' names. Not only to me is that very disrespectful to continue to pass on those names and hurtful, it has no value to us as a black community in America. And that's just how I perceive it. I also kind of got the idea, we got the idea when we were learning more about Malcolm X. Malcolm X also took on the last name X, which formal last name was Little, and he removed it and put the X. It's more for his religious purpose at the time, being studying Islamic beliefs, but also because the last name was a slave last name. He didn't want it anymore. He didn't understand why he had it, and it did nothing. It caused no value to his life. So that gave me that initial idea, but then like I said, I added on to it being like, okay, well, also those last names seem like they have a financial value as well, and we don't have neither. So why are we holding on to those names? And so, yeah, I thought, all right, well, my son, I don't want him to be attached to those last names anymore. I will not personally continue to allow my family bloodline that I've created and stuff to continue to carry the burden and the disrespect and just everything else that comes with slave last names. A lot of people keep the names. It's not because they're slave names and stuff. They look at it more so they have good family members in their family that have those names, and they've changed the dynamic of the name, so they want to keep it. If that's what you want to do, cool. But for me, I'm not keeping the last names. I'm happy to say my son has a completely new last name that has no attachment to that kind of those horrific incidents, and he is empowered every day by his last name, in my opinion, to know that we're adding value to his name, and he'll be able to pass to his kids hopefully.
He's the only person in recorded history that has his last name. We did all of our research, and he's the only person in the world right now with that last name.
And that's cool. Think about that.
First name. Also,
his last name is an acronym. So Recoy, you spell it R-C-O-Y. So Recoy, the acronym is Recreation of Yourself. Thought that was really dope.
Which actually with everything that we pretty much just said.
Yes.
You know, once again, it's not about separating ourselves from our family. It's about empowering our families, and, you know, giving our families value. You know, it's not looking down on other family members because they have a different last name. That'll be, you know, kind of stupid. We'll
probably make a follow-up video as well if anybody have any extra questions, or if, you know, in real life want to know. I mean, we're not, you know, trying to make it a controversial thing, but, you know, I would hope that maybe other people may get the same ideas and we can share ideas. I think we're pretty much wrapped up this video.
We got so much more information on these things, but you know, if you want to know, you can ask us personally. This was just a video that we decided to put out. Or if you want us to make another video, comment. We don't got like a bunch of subscribers or nothing, but you can comment and tell us to make another video. Or we could do another video explaining like the history of black people or whatever we know. The history that we know and that we've researched for the past year and some change. We can make a video talking about all of that if you guys want to understand our ideas and concepts.
Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you like this video and comment. Let us know how you feel. I'm going to leave a link down below for Anthony Browder and some of his books.
I'm also going to put some clips at like the end of the video that you guys can watch. Pretty much Malcolm X explaining his thing, and just black people explaining the names, and maybe even throwing some history clips. But, you know, yeah.
So, thanks for watching.
See you later.
Slave masters, and it was like, ooh, I got to chill. When I heard that, I'm like, shit, I didn't really think about that, but that's...
And it's also interesting when you think about how many black people's last names are Johnson, Washington, Jefferson, but you don't really hear too many Lincolns. You know what I mean? And it shows you like who we took our slave masters' names, and the ones who were the most powerful had the most slaves at the time. So it's like, man, our forefathers were slave owners, and we've taken their names and carried them on.
You never thought to rename your kids?
Mr. O'Connor.
What is your real name?
Malcolm X.
Is that your legal name?
As far as I'm concerned, it's my legal name.
Have you been to court to establish that
I didn't have to go to court to be called Murphy or Jones or Smith. Excuse me for answering you this way.
That's
if
all right.
a Chinese person were to say his name was Patrick Murphy, you would look at him like he's insane, because Murphy is an Irish name, a European name, or the name that has a Caucasian or white background. And a yellow person, Chinese is a yellow man, and he has nothing to do or no connection whatsoever with the name Murphy. And if it doesn't look proper for a person who is yellow or Chinese to be walking around named Murphy or Jones or Johnson or Bunch or Powell, I think it would be just as improper for a black person or the so-called Negro in this country, as we're taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to walk around with these names. And therefore he teaches us that during slavery, the same slave master who owned us put his last name on us to denote that we were his property. So that when you see a Negro today who's named Johnson, if you go back in his history, you'll find that he was once his grandfather, or one of his forefathers was owned by a white man who was named Johnson. If his name is Bunch, his grandfather was owned by a white man that was named Bunch.
Would you mind telling me what your father's last name was?
My father didn't know his last name. My father got his last name from his grandfather, and his grandfather got it from his grandfather, who got it from the slave master. The real names of our people were destroyed during slavery.
Was there any line, any point in the genealogy of your family when you did have to use the last name, and if so, what was it?
The last name of my forefathers was taken from them when they were brought to America and made slaves. And then the name of the slave master was given, which we refuse. We reject that name today.
You mean you won't even tell me what your father's supposed last name was, or gifted last name was?
I never acknowledge it.
Kinda cute. Hey, but now she wanna catch up. I don't never answer. She's so fucking